Never shall innocent blood be shed, yet the blood of the wicked shall flow like a river. The three shall spread their blackened wings and be the vengeful striking hammer of God. You people have been chosen to reveal our existence to the world. You will witness what happens here today, and you will tell of it later. All eyes to the front. You must watch, dear. It'll all be over soon.
Now you will receive us. We do not ask for your poor or your hungry. We do not want your tired and sick.
It is your corrupt we claim.
It is your evil that will be sought by us.
With every breath, we shall hunt them down.
Each day, we will spill their blood till it rains down from the skies.
Do not kill, do not rape, do not steal. These are principles which every man of every faith can embrace.
These are not polite suggestions. These are codes of behavior. And those of you that ignore them will pay the dearest cost.
There are varying degrees of evil. We urge you lesser forms of filth, not to push the bounds and cross over into true corruption, into our domain.
For if you do, one day you will look behind you and you will see we three. And on that day, you will reap it.
And we will send you to whatever God you wish.
And shepherds we shall be, for thee, my Lord, for thee. Power hath descended forth from thy hand. May swiftly carry out thy command. So we shall flow river forth to thee, and teeming with souls shall it ever be.
In nomine Patri.
Et Filii, Spiritus Sancti.
How far are we going to take this, Star?
The question is not how far. The question is, do you possess the Constitution, the depth of faith to go as far as is needed?
Well, hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hey there.
Do you notice how soothing and complex that music is leading into this?
Well, yes, I did. That's why I chose it.
Sung by a choir in the back of some big stone church. It's reverberating off. There's no super fun rock band stuff here. It's just peaceful and reflective, and it soothes my soul.
It does to me too. I actually listen to this song while I'm working sometimes.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a classical nerd. I especially like the sung classical music. So it's not just the symphony, but actually the choir or chorus that's attendant with the music as well. And also a bit of a rock metal nerd that tends to follow kind of classical music. So the fun thing you can do, you go to like music editing software and to get these classical music and change the instrumentation up, and it sounds pretty cool. So you can make it sound like a metal rock band with little like violins and stuff in the background. It's really cool.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So, the music is complex and it's deep. Has a lot of meanings, different things going on. It's not just superficial on the surface, motivating emotions. So, doesn't that kind of reflect what we do here? We go deeper than the superficial. And Nick is leading our discussion tonight. And when Nick is leading, you know damn well it's not going to be superficial.
Not tonight. You guys should see the notes he's got.
They're incomplete, I think, but yeah.
Dude, there's 4 pages of them.
I got so many slides and notes, and yeah, well, it's a very complex subject, and I like to be very tedious and try to cover all my bases, although I'm just a finite creature with a finite amount of time.
So what I heard is we might have to cut you off before this stream turns into a hostage situation for our viewers tonight.
No, I selected short quotes and short clips, and I'm trying to add levity to the situation, but while making the point with that levity. So y'all appreciate that. So the topic is epistemology. That's like the philosophical category of knowledge, logic, and why it matters, or just epistemology and logic. And we're going to get towards the end, try to apply it to. We'll kind of do it throughout, but at the end, I'll bring kind of to a closed focus why it is so necessary for us to understand knowledge and logic, and even the means of spreading knowledge. I'll attempt that as well, which is kind of it'll be a little tongue-in-cheek because sometimes the medium becomes a message, and well, I don't think streams are the best medium, but it could be worse, like advertisements, ads, television. So streams are a little bit better than television, my understanding, but they could also be worse. But anyways, I'm getting off topic. I'm straying down roads that I haven't gone to. Let's start off with something. I hope our audience has seen this movie. This label comes from this movie called Idiocracy. Brawndo, the thirst mutilator. It's got electrolytes. So I don't know how many hundreds of years. I forgot how many hundreds of years down the road where the movie was. I think like the 90s or something, or early 2000s. Anyways, the guy goes in a cryogenic freeze or whatever, and he wakes up and there's this dystopian idiot society where everything's gone to shit. And he's a man of average intelligence, and he's the smartest man in the world. And at some point in the movie, he gets hired on to fix a problem. The plants aren't growing. So the main character is Private Joe Bowers. He says, for the last time, I'm pretty sure what's killing the crops is this Brawndo stuff. But Brawndo's got what plants crave. It's got electrolytes. So wait a minute. What you're saying is you want us to put water on the crops? Yes. Water, like out of the toilet? Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be out of the toilet, but yeah, that's the idea. Secretary of State says, but Brawndow's got what plants crave. The other guy says, it's got electrolytes. And the main character says, okay, look, the plants aren't growing. So I'm pretty sure that Brawndo's not working. Now, I'm no botanist, but I do know that if you put water on plants, they grow. Well, I've never seen no plants grow out of no toilet. Hey, that's good. You sure you ain't the smartest guy in the world?
By the way, it's
Okay, yeah.
500 years, and my opinion of that was they were always wildly optimistic as to how long it would take to reach that level.
Huxley was right. Orwell, maybe to some extent, but I think Huxley was right. In the Brave New World, a bunch of idiots led away by entertainment dampens down the moral and ethical fabric and epistemological fabric of society, where, of course, this is not purely a deductive argument, but it's based on induction, obvious induction over time. Yes, these plants have light. Yes, there's soil, but they're watering them with Brawndo. At least something will grow with sunlight, proper soil, and water. Well, the key ingredient missing is water. And they're saying, well, water out of a toilet. Well, actually, water out of a toilet,
It's got the shit plants need.
Yes, the shit.
Quite literally.
Okay. So I'll remove that from the thing. I'll just add this so everybody can have some shits and giggles. So you also hear in society things like everything's subjective. You might hear things such as there is no such thing as objective knowledge. Or you need to wake up from rationality and logic. Or I deny objective logic and so do some Eastern shit. Or some Eastern religion, they're Krishnas or whatever the hell it is.
My truth is just as good as your truth.
Well, so
not being so Western.
Well, what Steve said is an operationalization of what Nick is talking about. So Nick's talking, truth is subjective, truth is this. Those are assertions. My truth is just as good as your truth, or to quote Adam Savage, I reject your reality and substitute my own. These are operational statements of not just a declarative, but they're saying this is how I actually think. This is their epistemology, and we're going to get into what that means. But what Steve said is, and you hear it out of women all the time. Now, there's a fun little fact that I'm sure we'll get into later in the stream, but if your epistemology is that everything is subjective, well, you're going to have a fun time when the objective realities of the world come crashing down on you. Because your epistemology is itself subjective and therefore subject to change and interpretation. Women cannot have a solid philosophical ground to argue on, which is why they crash out of debates all the time.
Well, I don't know where this quote
Reels before reels
comes from.
I'll bring that up again.
Cliff High. He's kind of a flaky guy, but really intelligent. Maybe some of you have heard of him. But anyway, he this is where I learned it. You can ignore reality all you want, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality.
Plants ain't gonna grow on Brawndo, guys. It's got electrolytes.
That's the reality.
Well, and there's an interesting theme here of, yes, okay, the marketing and the propaganda was plants crave Brawndo. It's got what plants need. Okay. But that's not true. And so there was an epistemology in this movie of, well, Brawndo has what plants crave. Right. But it just because you have an epistemology does not mean that you have access to the truth.
True. And truth in an objective sense, and the foundations of epistemology, which I'll get into later, and why they all the theories that they try to prove while conveniently trying to eschew theology from it, or God, right? I'll say that. They end up collapsing upon themselves, and we'll get to that later, because they have no basis of an objective reality or objective universal laws of logic. And that's part of how the different foundations of logic come about, and we'll attack those. Okay, so I'll get to some definitions. So, we've talked about epistemology. Again, epistemology is theory of knowledge, answering questions such as, what is knowledge? What, if anything, can we know? What is the difference between opinion and knowledge? And that comes from looking at philosophy, The Unbearable Heaviness of Philosophy Made Lighter by Donald Palmer. Also, there's another two branches of philosophy. There's usually three. I mentioned this a few times. There's basically value theory and ethics. They're usually combined together. There's metaphysics and epistemology. Well, metaphysics is like the branch of philosophy studying the basic structure of existence or reality. Value theory and ethics is the branch of philosophy that deals with value and goodness, right and wrong. So those are the three main categories of philosophy. And we're particularly talking about epistemology, yet when you talk about one, the other two are always included. You can't talk about one without the other two being included. Now, we're also talking about epistemology and logic. Now, what is logic? Donald Palmer in that same book says, logic, the branch of philosophy that studies the structure of valid inference, a purely formal discipline interested in. So it can also be a purely formal discipline interested in the structure of argumentation rather than its content. And that's actually a distinction between informal logic and formal logic. So we'll get to epistemology now.
Hey, Nick,
This
I
is
got a question.
sure.
This seems like a lot of talk and big words. All I want to know is, what is the meaning of life?
To
Do I have
glorify
to
God
use
and
this
enjoy Him forever.
epistemology to understand that? Why am I here? What is my purpose? What is the meaning of life? What should I do? Do I have to use this
Steve.
epistemology stuff?
I have an answer for you.
Oh, okay.
What is the meaning of life? Boats and hoes, baby.
Well, that's some of the stuff in some red pill stuff that we're trying to push back against. It's not all, and if you press these guys on it, they probably wouldn't say that's what they're doing or what their purpose is, but kind of tongue in cheek. But yeah, boats knows. But no, actually, the Westminster Shorter Catechism, the very first question says, what is the chief end of man? It's man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. Okay, you disagree with me, fine. We can deal with that later.
But maybe we should understand why they said that. Ooh, that would be going into metaphysics. The level of argument beyond what's at the surface, or the question, why did they say that? What are they striving after? What are they trying to understand? Now, he would be a fool to say, well, I don't think God exists. Therefore, this whole thing is folly. I don't even have to go here. Well, that's going to lead you down the path to, oh, boats and hoes.
Man does what is right in his own eyes. If there is no God and there's no one to be accountable, who actually really cares? And why do you even care about boats and hoes except for your flesh wants that, I guess, right? What a shitty purpose to go after is boats and hoes, but yeah. Okay. So, John, so we're talking about metaphysics, epistemology, and value theory, which value theory people usually use that interchangeably with ethics. They're related. There's a distinction, but I'm not going to get into that here. I'll present this so everybody can see the definition that I got. Got this from Dr. John Frame. Took a class from him. He's got a book called A History of Western Philosophy and Theology, and he says, my general conclusion is that metaphysics, epistemology, and value theory are not independent of one another. Rather, they presuppose one another and influence one another. So your view of epistemology, it also depends on what is and what is the good. Your good also flows on what is. How are you designed? Is there essences? Is there a value of knowledge? Is knowledge good or bad? Is truth good or bad? And should you pursue truth? Okay, it's an ethical statement. And you perform that in a certain reality, metaphysics. Okay. Yeah, okay. Another definition from Frame is epistemology is theory of knowledge. It asks, what is knowledge? How is knowledge possible? How should we go about knowing? How do we distinguish truth from falsity, reality from appearance? So notice how epistemology itself, it addresses not only how knowledge possible, foundations, how do we go about knowing, which could include like observation and logic. How do we distinguish truth from falsity, reality from appearance? Okay, that reality from appearance, that also deals with metaphysics. Okay, how do we distinguish truth from falsity? Okay, that's your ethics, right? Good and bad, right? Is there a good way of knowing? Is there a bad way of knowing? It presupposes an ethic. Okay. It's interesting, though. How do we come about knowledge? And I'll go back. This is about 500 years ago. It was by one of the reformers, John Calvin. Yeah, I follow Reformed theology. I like John Calvin. You can consider me a Calvinist. That's fine. He writes in his very first book, chapter and paragraph. So the very first chapter, book, and paragraph of his Institutes, John Calvin writes in the book called Institutes of the Christian Religion, our wisdom, insofar as it ought to be deemed true and solid wisdom, consists almost entirely of two parts, the knowledge of God and of ourselves. He continues saying, but as these are connected together by many ties, it is not easy to determine which of the two precedes and gives birth to the other. So here you see knowledge and how it interrelates with metaphysics on a higher level and on a lower level. So ourselves in this reality which God created. So knowledge is not
just brings to mind some basic words. God creates, man procreates. Yeah. Doesn't the Bible say we are made in the likeness and image of God? God creates. We have some reflection of that in our ability to procreate.
Repeat what you said. I was looking at something in the chat.
We are made in the likeness of image of God. So God creates and man procreates, which is kind of a faint aspect of the nature of God, but it exists within us. So these are connected.
Right. We're image bearers, so we reflect God as creator, though we are not the originator. We do
Correct. Yeah.
things correct, right? Absolutely correct, Steve. So there's a limitation to who we are as creatures. That might tie into our depths of knowledge itself,
Well,
but also
Nick,
of the world that's created.
didn't we do a stream where we used science to demonstrate that the empirical is inherently insufficient? Like no matter how much testing you do, you can never test enough. No matter how much
Yes.
observation you do, you can never observe enough.
Yes, absolutely correct. And I want you to save that thought when I address empiricism.
Oh, okay. I can do that.
Absolutely correct. You're jumping ahead of the game, but absolutely correct. You're tracking. Good. There we go. Okay. Also, I quoted this book, I think a few streams ago. I've used it in a couple different streams. It's entitled The Natural Law. It's a brief introduction to biblical defense by David Haynes and Andrew A. Wolford. I get it from page 43. The authors state human beings begin engaging in abstraction of the whole very shortly after birth. Abstraction is not measurable by, as like we were talking about empiricism. It's not abstraction is not something that's empirical. You can study people claiming to have made abstraction, sure. You can gather that data, but abstraction itself is not based on mere observation alone. But people think upon in abstract ideas in a thought world, you could say, apart from what is observable.
Okay.
Based on what is observable. Sure.
Can I make a point here?
Yes.
Babies are born and they have to learn. They don't have any experience to base reality off of. So they have to learn it based on zero experience. That requires abstract thought. If you only observe the world based on your personal experiences, you're not thinking abstractly. And babies could not grow into adulthood to sentience and whatever you want to call greater knowledge if they lack the ability to learn without first experiencing it. Now they can experience something, but then they have to interpret it using abstraction.
So there's something innate in these created beings, or these beings. You can even deny creation at this point, even though I would never condone it. But the fact is, they do abstraction, and additionally, they write, knowledge has this strange character of being intentional. This means it points to an object other than itself. In other words, all knowledge is of something. Even the knowledge of the nature of knowledge is a knowledge of something. The process of moving from the individual particular things to a concept which applies to many individuals is called, in Aristotelian Thomistic philosophy, abstracting. Okay. So as Steve said, they begin these abstractions, even though they're little babies, but there's something innate in the creatures or these beings which allows them to do this abstraction from an early age, even before so much experience. I'm not saying that experience and observations that they have are irrelevant, but their very brains, and I would say even their souls, are not pure tabula rasa. They're not a blank slate.
Yeah, but they're not yet an expert.
No, of course not.
Okay, here's an engineering definition of an expert. An expert learns more and more about less and less until he knows absolutely everything about nothing.
You don't understand your own limitations of observation and reason. The more you know, the more you should know that you don't know.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I
But
brought up the science of observation. That even at the most subatomic level, there are limits to what we can observe. There are limits to what we can know. And everything in between those observations you take, whether you call it this or not, you take it on article of faith that it works. Okay? Because you can infer that it works, but you cannot observationally prove that it works. You can build math that says it works, but you cannot see the math in action. You cannot observe the thing itself doing it.
it's all around you. It is inescapable. Now, there's also some problems. We've hinted on this. Arriving at there's particulars you can study, and then you make universal categories. We categorize them, usually these universals, from particulars. That's the observation and abstraction. And it's a problem of the oneness and the many. It's a problem in unity versus diversity. It's a classical problem in philosophical thought. I don't think it's particularly a problem if we understand our own limits in a triune, being created by the triune God. Anyways, this gets into other things like the correspondence theory versus coherence theory. Have any of you all heard about that? So correspondence theory is the ideas reflect a certain objective truth. You can think of like Platonism, and coherence theory is the particulars become further abstracted and fit within a certain systemic classification of universals. And there's an interesting thing that Dr. Bahnsen says of this, because this is important in epistemology. These are two categories. I don't think it's a problem, but people who tend to reject God or want to have their own autonomous thinking, they have problems reconciling these things. And I ask you guys to listen closely.
And I don't want to apologize for this, but it takes a while to understand the way Van Til uses terms. Again, I was trained in analytical modes of thought. Van Til's trained as an idealist. And in one sense, it's kind of fun. It's like learning a foreign language. You know, you go and you read Van Til's, what's it all about? And this analysis and synthesis is really part of the dynamics and problematics of idealistic philosophy. And because none of us, I think, really tune into that very much. And he doesn't say, as you say, very much about it. I just decided to skip it. But maybe you and I could privately go into it if you want. It really is a question as to whether you understand the whole and then analyze it, or whether you synthetically build up from particulars to the whole. And Van Til says both of those are part of each other from a Christian perspective. Okay, we have to go to lunch in a second, but he deals with two theories of truth in the next page and a half: the correspondence theory and the coherence theory. And I've had critics of Van Til tell me, write and tell me, or tell me to my face, what Van Til's answer is to this. Does Van Til prefer the coherence or the correspondence theories of truth? There you go. You're catching on now. And whenever you have these alternatives, with Van Til, you have to be very careful. He doesn't think that we choose one or the other. What I found fascinating when I went to graduate school and studied epistemology, and this insight doesn't come from a believer, is that it turns out that a sophisticated approach to the theory of knowledge will tell you that the coherence and the correspondence theories of truth are not even alternatives to the same question. We call them theories of truth, and popular apologists will often say, you know, you have this approach and you have that approach and you have to choose between them. But the reason you have to choose between them is because they're not answering the same question. The correspondence theory, to be very I'm going to speak to the bunny rabbits here. The correspondence theory is really talking about the nature of truth, the nature of truth. Whereas the coherence theory tells us something about how we know what is true. Okay, so that in essence, the coherence theory says if what you are claiming cannot be put within a sensible theory that hangs together, then it isn't true. That is, anything that's true has got to be consistent with the other things you know to be true. Okay? Whereas the correspondence theory is telling us that those things we know to be true, we call true because they correspond to the objective world. Those are different questions, in essence. That is, what is the metaphysics of truth? What is the nature of truth? Correspondence. Over against what is the mark of truth? How do I know that this thing is acceptable? Because it fits within a particular theory. It's coherent with the theory or the other facts that I know. But Van Til, long before I went to graduate school years ago, had the good sense to say, as Christians, we hold to both. It's not one or the other. And with this, we'll take our break.
There we go.
Hey, Nick, I just have to say something here. Listening to this hurts my brain. Because, okay, I kind of understand, but it's like they're speaking a different language. They're using words in ways that is foreign to me. Now, I can follow along. I can grasp some of this, but they are immersed in this world. Okay, I came from the engineering world. We have our own slang, and we can rattle things off that will blow other people away, and they can't keep up with us. It's the same thing here. I'm not immersed in this language, so it takes me longer to catch up. So, for our audience, if you don't understand everything the guy said, yeah, okay, that's fine. You're just not immersed in the language. That doesn't mean he's blowing smoke up your ass or that you're not capable of understanding. Just take from it what you can understand and, build upon that.
It's like anything.
Charlie.
It takes years to get good at something, and thinking about thinking is probably one of the hardest things you're ever gonna try to do, because it requires more than just observational reaction. It requires more than just logic. It requires you pull on all of the tools of thought that we have developed over the millennia.
Right, and a lot of this stuff when I was pulling my notes together, I was rereading stuff. Well, some new material, but a lot of stuff that I had highlighted, wrote notes down in books and margins that I read when I was started this topic around 21 to 22 years old, studied it really in depth until I was about, let's just say about 27. So end of undergrad all the way through, about 27, 26, 27, all the way through seminary. So undergraduate school, graduate school, and seminary. So let's break it down in more simple terms. Reasoning, rationality, observations. We've talked about correspondence theory, coherence theory. Put that in the back of your mind. Let's move on to some more easier items to discuss. Reasoning. Most human beings I would say, inescapably use reasoning. There's the mentally ill and like the psychologically messed up people. Okay, grant that, right? There's mental disorders, people born with mental handicaps, Okay. But on the whole, there's human society operates on reasoning, rationality. So there's an idea that, You should reason, and you should have some coherent, logical thought. Oh, and you make observations as well. You make inferences or from those observations, which you call induction, right? So that deals in probability. And generally holds to be true if you believe the world's consistent and doesn't change. Is not constantly in flux and changing in chaos and stuff like that.
I don't need any of that shit. I'm just going to use common sense.
Pretty much is common sense. Pretty much is, right? But we are operating in a society that at sometimes operates on common sense and then eschews it at will based on feels and other crap.
So some of this crap goes into why common sense is correct, and that's thinking about thinking.
Mm-hmm. Well, now I'll give you three problematic philosophies of epistemology. Rationalism. Everything is logical. No, your emotions, your feelings, and even observations are not reliable. Only purely deductive, logical arguments can build are necessary for your life. Let's put it that way. That's your philosophy. It means a rejection of empiricism, rejection of just observations because it deals in probabilities, not certainty. So rationalism, everything, I want to know everything, and everything has to be reduced to this logical sequence, or I'm going to reject it. But nobody lives that way, do they? Hell
That
no.
would be tedious. If I had to do that much thinking before I made any decision or took any action, it would be analysis paralysis. I need some shortcuts.
Then there's empiricism. Problem of empiricism. Only what can be observed. Only what is observable is necessary for knowledge and what is true. And Plutarch, this is where I nudge you.
I've been thinking about this a little bit, and the most common reaction I get from intelligent people when I attack empiricism is what they say is, well, it doesn't matter that you can't observe the in-between. Okay. As long as I can observe, the analogy we used was a photon hits an electron and has to go back to the detector, and the electron's already moved on. And what the photon displays on your camera is merely an echo of what was. Okay. It is true of a state that was, right? And they say, and what the empiricists will say is, well, that's good enough. I don't need to know any more than that, because I can infer that the electron was here and then the electron was there. Okay. And it's good enough for me to know because I can make some useful observations and useful inferences on the basis of this, right? We can infer that electrons orbit the nucleus. Okay, cool. It's some cool things about that. Although quantum mechanics is going to have fun with that particular grade school science lesson. But my point is that the fact that you don't care that there is something in between does not mean that there is no value in acknowledging that there is something in between. Okay, what you're saying is good enough. Okay. And
That
for
itself
most
that itself is beyond empiricism to say. You're making a value judgment of observations that's not based on mere observation.
Correct. So when you say when people say, "Oh, there is no God," and when you talk about what we termed the God of the in between, right? When you say, oh, well, there is no God because I can't observe it. Well, you're making a just straight assertion of that you cannot empirically prove. And in doing so, you have destroyed your empiricism. Okay. And that's the limitation of empiricism.
So if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to observe it, did it make a sound?
Yes, it did.
Can we know that by observation? Or do we have to use logics, use some other means to determine that?
Correct. So if there was an observation, like let's say we had a microphone set up and you hear a tree fall in the forest. Well, okay, there's your observation that the tree fell and that it made a sound. And do not get me started on the quantum idiocy that people throw around on this particular topic. That's the scientist in me cringes every time I hear people talk about that. But what actually happens is, even if there's no one around or no living thing to observe the sound is still made. And we can infer that using the rules of logic by saying, well, it made a sound when we did observe it. And so therefore we can logically, rationally assume that it makes a sound when we don't observe it.
So let me point out something here. I bring up these sayings, common sense or horse sense. I didn't say horse sense, but did a tree fall and did it make a noise? You know what? These are common things that the common man says. No, they don't have the language and they haven't broken this down, but they're really talking about the same concepts that Nick is talking about today. Okay, they're not highly educated and eloquent in this language, but they're still kind of thinking about some of the same things. Certain individuals have gone much deeper to develop terminology and dissected these and gone to the root of what it means to think about these things.
Well, Steve, we said something else in that stream we did and the stream was called I forget the name of it. But one of the things that we said was, even the average mind conceptually understands what we're talking about when you ask the question, if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a noise? And most people will just react with a yes answer because they make the inference of, I have heard a tree fall in the forest, therefore when a tree falls in the forest, it makes a sound. Okay. And believe it or not, that answer is actually better than the one that the empiricists give. Okay. Because the empiricists have to go through all this thing. Well, but and they well, did the tree, was anyone there to hear it, to empirically observe the tree falling? Oh, well, no. Well, okay. Then the tree can't have made a sound because there was no empirical observation of it. And then the sane normie looks at you and goes, you're stupid. The tree made a sound and we know it made a sound. Okay. And so then you try to pull in these esoteric quantum mechanical theories of science to try and prove your point. And the average normie's looking at you going, a lot like, Nick, you used idiocracy. And they're looking at you going, you're stupid. Okay. Because the normie recognizes that what you're saying is really all you're doing is snowing them under with big words, what you're really doing is hoping they'll shut up and go away, right? With their annoying understanding that you are incomplete in your understanding of the world.
Correct. And there's certain assumptions that the empiricists are assuming, like the constancy of nature, which they cannot empirically prove. So they have all these observations, but they can't say they're consistent over time.
Yeah, Nick,
They're stuck in a presupposition behind that as well. But
Nick,
they're not operating as in reality.
if you really want to blow an empiricist's mind, start explaining relativity. Because relativity takes the very fabric of the physical universe, and it's literally right in the name. It makes it relative. It makes it malleable. Now, to Einstein, this was this great thing that allowed him to answer all these really cool questions. Okay. But to an empiricist, it destroys their worldview because there is the non-constancy in the core rules of the universe. Time moves at different speeds on the basis of how far you are, how close you are from a source of mass gravity. Okay. And that means that a very fundamental quote unquote constant called the speed of light is not actually a constant. It actually, in our constant terms, in miles per hour or kilometers per hour, it changes quite significantly. And they're doing some really cool science now. Like, we may never be able to see the edge of the universe because the universe is expanding too fast, and the light will never get here.
So, if I'm in a spaceship that's accelerated to half the speed of light, and I have a light bulb on the other side of the room, that light is traveling to me and I see it with my eyes. How fast is that light traveling? It's coming this way at the speed of light, but we're going that way at the speed of light. So is it traveling half the speed of light?
To you, it appears that way. It's that would be a redshift. It actually appears to use a redshift, and they've actually done these cool models you can go see that actually show you what that light would look like. It's really cool stuff.
Oh, I mean, okay, these are deep thoughts. And doesn't apply to my everyday, but we can think deep thoughts and ask these questions, and then somebody's got to think about it. And,
but Steve,
the answer.
You actually just proved the non-constancy of the universe. Okay. In
I
terms
kind
of
of
the
thought
observer.
that's where I was going.
Right. Well, no, because it's in terms of the observer. The speed of light itself didn't actually change, but the speed of light cannot go faster than the speed of light. So your observation of it has to be different than it would be if you were just standing still.
Yeah. But there's a danger here. If you dissect things too far down and you make, everything have to be built up from the bottom at the molecular level, you have to keep in mind this adage: 100 bezels, wingtip to wingtip, can fly up a gnat's ass. So how deep do you want to go?
Oh no, I'm good. I don't need to I don't need to go any further in that. Oh, Mr. Dugan. Oh, what speed of frame is it's frame of reference for the photon. Right. That is what I was trying to describe. What is the speed of light from the frame of reference of a photon? It's, depending on how you look at it, it's either infinity or zero, and they end up being the same thing. Because the speed of light, if you were to look out at the universe from the perspective of the speed of light, it would change. The universe would not change. Brian Cox does a great explanation of this. I do not claim to understand it. He is way smarter than I am, but there is an actual answer to that question, and Brian Cox does a good job of it. Go look him up on YouTube.
All right. So rationalism can be the problem of rationalism is it circles back to, well, everything has to be done according to reason, logic, deduction, but that assumes constancy of logic, and so you have to circularly appeal to logic, right? It is reason because reason, empiricism. Oh, it is because empiricism, yet empiricism cannot prove empiricism because you can't observe, the laws of empiricism. They're internally self-refuting, circular, but also irrationalism. I feel a certain way. There is no objective knowledge because everything is destroyed by the observer and his inner thought, psychology, et cetera, his own experience, right? So there is no logic. There is no reason. He reasons. It's self-refuting. My contention is irrationalism. Those who project that belong in a psych ward, or they're of no use to society if they actually operate that way, which they actually don't. If they observe a speeding bus, I think another person that I get it from a book about car wrecks and speeding buses, right? If you operate everything as well, there's no true observations. Observations aren't reliable, and you can't make inferences based on observations. So one day, people get hit by cars and buses, and there's a certain physics involved with the bus going 60 miles an hour. Hey, yesterday the guy he died from getting hit by a bus, but today I can step in front of the bus. It won't happen if I get hit at 60 miles an hour. I'll be scot-free.
Well, Wile E. Coyote didn't understand this. If he was in a shack that had just dropped off the cliff, was crashing to the ground, if he would have just stepped off the porch right before it smashed, he'd have been just fine. It's a matter of perspective, right? Wait a minute. No, he was traveling just the same speed as the shack. Therefore, it would have been the same splotch on the ground. So, I don't remember where I was going with that. Plutarch can pick it up.
Well, okay, so wow. I actually just read a tweet that Rollo wrote yesterday, and this I think speaks to a larger problem that we have in society right now. We are so focused on empiricism as the only way to know truth that I'm not going to get into the specifics of what Rollo said, but so he's tweeting at somebody's, and this person is saying, oh, the red pill says this and the red pill says that, and that's just not true. And then Rollo comes back and says, aha, but I have seen it in action, so therefore it is true. Okay. The reality is that the two truths, we have to sit here and say, okay, well, what level of truth are we talking about here? Because Rollo's observation is correct, but so is the other fellow's observation. Okay. There is more there is more in between those two observations. Okay. And you've probably heard this phrase before. The truth is somewhere in the middle. That's kind of what they're trying to get at when you hear that, is there's this truth that is somewhere in the middle. Okay. Okay. Some guy says, oh, I don't know any women who are trying to hook up with guys 20 years older than them. And Rollo says, well, but I've seen it all the time. Rollo's not wrong. Shit, I've seen it. Okay. Right. Yeah. But I've also seen and talked to women who you mentioned the thought of doing that and they stick their finger down their mouth. They have no interest in guys like that. Well, but they're valuable guys, Yeah, but they don't, because there are lots of there are lots of women out there who are not chasing those guys. And okay, so empirically, what is it? Well, the answer is both. But when we as people argue, particularly on the internet and particularly on Twitter with its short format, we tend to think that we're dunking on each other when we throw an observation, okay? Because we are not going that one step deeper to abstract away the observation and say it's not about the observation. The observations are only as useful as what they can help me choose to do. Okay. But when we fight, when we argue amongst ourselves, we are constantly thinking that all we have to do is provide more observational evidence than the other guy has. Okay.
It's like fighting statistics with statistics, and which statistics are right. And you have to delve deeper actually to how they got their data, what were their biases, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. The answer is the empiricism is the first step. It is a necessary step. You cannot fight the fight. You cannot go on that journey, whatever phraseology you want to use, without first having made the observations. The trap is we get stuck there. Okay. I can say, do women want high value men? Yeah, okay. I can also say, yes, there are women out there who absolutely will date and fuck men 20 years older than them. But I can also say there's women out there who won't. They won't do it. And so when you've built your entire life around an observation and made the observation your God, okay, then the moment that you meet a woman who just says no, what do? Your entire epistemology is shattered. Okay. Because what you knew was just proven in front of you to not be true.
So, another common problem is people will take two extremes and say, whoa, therefore the truth lies in the middle.
Not necessarily.
It might, but it's not required to lie.
I'm not a Hegelian.
I'm not a Hegelian. That's a misapplication, a misunderstanding of the laws of logic. The truth is not required to be in the middle. Okay, you have this Overton window. You have the left, you got the right, you got the progressives, you got the conservatives. Oh, I'm going to be a moderate. I'm going to be in the middle. Therefore, I'm right. And these two guys, right wing, left wing, look how far out to lunch they are.
Yeah,
no, it doesn't work that way.
You assume truth is the middle instead of the truth existing outside of people's preferences.
That's what I was going to say. Sometimes the truth is outside your observation. It's not your observation. It's not the other guy's observation. It's not the middle. It is somewhere else entirely. Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Those observations can get you closer to the truth. That's why I said you have to be willing to make the observation and accept the observation. But assuming that because you made an observation here's my language. You have observed something that is true. That does not make it truth. That does not make all other observations wrong.
And we can easily understand this. What if the truth lies outside of the Overton window? Will the majority of people see it then?
No, they can't. So, I was not trying to pick on Rollo. It was just happened to be this great back and forth that very clearly elucidates the limits of empiricism. It's like,
And you're also proving why it matters.
well, yeah, that too. But it's like there's this, Tacticus, exactly. Correlation versus causation, right? It's empiricism leans heavily on correlation. I see this thing, therefore this is true. Well, okay, you have observed something. That's great. Your problem is when you make the statement, therefore it is true. Okay. It is a truth. It is a piece of the truth, but it is not the whole truth. And empiricists must make the bits of information that they have into the whole truth. Remember what I said earlier on about the two observation points, and they say, oh, it doesn't matter because I have these two observation points and I can infer. Okay, so you're correlating, but you cannot then say I have the full truth, okay, because you don't. And it's when you think you do that you get into these stupid fights on the internet. There's a reason you guys don't see me post that much on Twitter. I'm sitting here going, am I having is this a conversation where we can learn something? Or is this a conversation where we're just going to throw facts at each other until one of us gives up? Nick, how am I doing?
Oh, you're doing good. You're hitting it on the tee.
Okay.
So basically, we're showing rationalism, empiricism, irrationalism. They all show limitations of knowledge and internal incoherencies if they take those philosophies themselves to be the ultimate truth. They actually end up cutting out one or the other. And I actually think there is subjectivism, but it also coheres with rationality, not rationalism. It also ought to cohere with what can empirical thought, but not empiricism. And in fact, every human being, aside from those who belong in the psych ward, actually do this.
I like the little caveat you put in there, because it's actually true though. The people who can't do this are, you say it belong in the psych ward because they're driven crazy by a world that they cannot comprehend. They're driven mad by it.
Yeah. Interesting Romans 1 description. Yeah, you can get so bad at giving over to a debased mind, you act utterly irrational and unethical, and with a way that does not cohere with reality. So we're going to move on here from this idea of an epistemology, and we're going to go to another field of epistemology, more specific, that of logic. And I'll start that off with this interesting quote from a movie. You might recognize it from Dumb and Dumber. So, Harry and Lloyd says, I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day. No way. I'll give you 3-to-1 odds. No, 5-to-1. No, 10-to-1. You're on. I'm going to get you. Nuh-uh. I don't know how, but I'm going to get you.
You're on.
He bought in, right? Logically bought in on you're on, and none of them caught on.
By the way, this reads like so many Twitter fights, guys. This right here. 10-to-1. You're on. Oh my. There, you just bought into the premise. and you weren't capable of seeing that you bought into the premise.
Yeah, the man says to the woman, will you sleep with me for $5? No! Will you sleep with me for $1 million? Yeah. Will you sleep with me for $10? What do you mean? I'm not a whore. Yes, you are. We're just negotiating the price now.
Bingo.
Yep.
Absolutely, guys. So now we're gonna move on to logic. Oh, this assumes logic, right? Everybody does it. Man. Okay. That's what makes this comedy movie Dumb and Dumber so funny. It assumes the audience has a basic grasp of logic, of reasoning. No, I'll get to that later. All right, so I'm going to go to what is logic? According to Donald Palmer in his book, logic is the branch of philosophy. I'll pull that up so everybody can see it. Branch of philosophy that studies the structure of valid inference, a purely formal, or it could be also a purely formal discipline interested in the structure of argumentation rather than in its content. Okay, that's logic. Now, also, there's involved in logic, there's deduction. Deduction is a form of argument in which the conclusion follows necessarily from the premises. Okay. Then there's induction, a form of argument in which the premises are empirical observations. Generalizations are made from these observations. In induction, the conclusion stands in only a probabilistic relation to the observations on which it is based.
Hey, Nick, can I stop you there at the probabilistic?
Sure.
Because I was actually just
Sure.
thinking about that. Here's the thing. I do want to give Rollo a little bit of credit here, because probabilistically, he is more likely to be right. Okay. There are absolutely more women out there who will go after older men because they're high value. He's absolutely right. Okay. Probabilistically. But the way the argument is framed, the way the argument is done from an empirical mode of, I see this, therefore you are wrong. No, you see this and you have seen a lot of this, and we can make some more observations and we can probably get close to a probability distribution of that being true. But there will always be women who, Steve, you were saying, oh, $10, $100, $1 million. Oh yeah, for $1 million I will, right? Or whatever the thing is. Okay, there will be women who you go, $1 million, nope. $1 billion, nope. $1 trillion, nope. All the money in the world, nope. Okay. Now the probability as the money curve goes up, the probability of them saying no goes down. It does, and we can chart that, but everyone wants to make these positive, definite statements in argumentation. Well, I see this, so therefore that. No one wants to do that. We call it mealy mouth. We call it weak language, right? To say, oh, well, the probabilities go, the probability goes up, or, it's more likely that women are willing to behave this way or that way, right? And I agree, but then you get into these fights on Twitter where two people are yelling data at each other and no one gets solved, and all the normies think both sides are fucking idiots. And you want to know something? The normies are right.
It's like it's like two autists trying to argue their point.
Yes, it is.
So, how does this relate to an argument with a woman when she says, "Nuh-uh, you can't generalize because it doesn't apply to me"?
When that happens in my life, I just say, well, yes, I can deal with it, and I'm going to.
Well, you have to generalize, otherwise we'll walk in front of the bus.
So this generalization is a shortcut.
A heuristic,
we make a whole bunch of observations and apply logic to those and figure out what is going to work most of the time.
Correct.
It's a generalization and it's a shortcut to the answer. Then we apply that, and everybody even women generalize. But when that generalization is used against them, it's like they are refuting the use of induction. Well, they actually are.
Yes, and it's why there's another chick who was going to debate Andrew, and he either, I didn't watch it, he either blew her up really quick or she just left, and now she's threatening to sue because what does Andrew's tactics are not that difficult, guys. They're pretty straightforward debate strategies. Okay, he is not exactly pulling out the big logical guns here to deal with these women, because pretty much what you do is what Steve said. You take their generalization, reframe it, and send it back at to them and watch them melt.
Oh, do they ever?
Is what it is.
Okay, this is a good, if you want to understand this stuff in action, watch Andrew Wilson debate a feminist, well, anyone for that matter. And don't get immersed in the back and forth. Move to the meta level. And okay, the meta level is, what are they doing about what they're talking about? And watch the other party be evasive, twist, not answer the question. And a classic is, well, he says an irrefutable fact to a woman. Do you agree? She says, I don't know if I agree until you tell me what you're going to do with this fact or with this logic. So you got something that you can't disagree with. I still won't agree if you're going to twist, if you're going to apply this in a way that I don't like. I was just laughing to myself when I heard
subjectivism
that.
much?
That's the meta argument. And you can learn so much if you watch us and watch Andrew debate whoever, and think at a higher level with what are the interactions and what's going on in that person's brain and how are they trying to evade. And it's so educational.
Well, this is part of why you need to be trained when you debate. You need to be trained in logic. And I'm going to get to this. That you're also addressing something that's formal and symbolic logic, where you actually can formulate their arguments and formulate your own and see how theirs actually cohere and your own. And you can focus on that and say, was a question ever, was a logical argument ever actually addressed, or was it evaded? So you have to step back. You have to step back and don't get sucked in by the feels or by the irrationalism of subjectivism in there.
Don't react.
Don't react.
If your first response is to react, you've already lost the debate. Okay. Yet another reason why I don't post much on Twitter. It takes me a long time to write a response. Hours. Sometimes. Not because I'm stupid or slow, but because I am working through the reaction. Then you analyze why you wanted to react that way. And then you go, okay, and now I have to set that aside. What was I actually reacting to versus, and then how can I change that into a message that might actually help people understand what's going on? Okay. And that takes time.
It's kind of like playing chess. Okay, if I make this move, then they're going to do that. I don't want them to do that. So I'm going to make this move over here. Oh, then they'll do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to give them that opportunity. So you got to think 3 moves ahead. Think about how they're going to react to what you do. predict how they're going to react and preclude them reacting in a way you don't want them to react. You kind of box them into a corner. So it does require a lot of thinking if you want to do it well.
Correct.
I mean,
And also,
has anyone
Go ahead.
actually watched a formal debate?
I have. I actually love those. I'm a nerd. Sorry.
You have to be a nerd to love these things. They are boring, they are long, and they spend a good amount of time beating each other's logic up. Not the actual idea. They like just beating each other's logic up. Okay. Why? Because that's what it actually takes to arrive at a, what's the word I'm looking for? To arrive at an answer that is a superior answer. Okay. An answer that will actually work to solve a problem or whatnot. One must go to these lengths because you cannot get a solid, strong answer by just reacting. You have to attack that answer from every possible angle. And the best way to do that is to put your idea up against somebody else who knows what they're doing, who knows how to think. Yeah, I mean, we in the Red Pill, we have put our ideas up against the reactionaries many, many times and clowned on them routinely for it. Because the Red Pill, and Steve can speak to this, the Red Pill was built for years and decades on the backs of men actually testing these ideas out, actually debating them, having conversations about them, attacking their own ideas. Okay. I don't know, Steve. Is that a proper characterization of the old school Red Pill?
It wasn't conscious, but let me put it this way. Is the truth arrived at by consensus or debate?
Okay, that's another thing. That is a view of epistemology and logic, is that it's consensus driven. I think it's absolutely faulty, because why should I care about consensus? Because ultimately that's a fallacy of the appeal to majority. So, anyways.
That's what I was going to say. Is it can't be consensus because consensus is just the logical fallacy of appeal to majority or authority, one of the two, or both in many cases.
What's that old adage? Iron sharpens iron.
Yep.
So I would think that answers it. And we know that from science too. I throw out a theory. How does that theory get accepted? It's still going to remain a theory. But it needs to be attacked. I need to defend it. Others need to get on both sides, and we're going to go at it, and we're going to try and poke holes in it. Other people are going to try and support it. Then, over time, it becomes generally accepted, or it is discarded. It's not a right. It's not resolved by consensus. It's resolved by debate.
It's by debate. It's also resolved by testing. Many of these theories that we talk about can be tested. Okay. And this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. We can test at what percentage. So if I offer a woman money to have sex with me, what percentage of women will say yes for what amount of money? Okay. And you can test that, and you can build a distribution of, if I offer X, Y percentage of women will have sex with me for money. Okay. And you can test that, and you can say, oh, well, if, I offer this. Okay. And that little verbal thing that Steve did earlier proves that point. Okay. You can test things in science. the testing is very important. Okay. We can talk about ideas, we can throw math equations back at each other, but no theory is really considered acceptable, not necessarily proven, just acceptable until it has been replicated. And you've heard Rollo talk about the replication crisis. Look, guys, it is real. Okay. He's 100% right on that. We are more interested in making sure people's feelings aren't hurt than we are, actually proving the theory. And so we don't replicate anymore. And there's a whole bunch of other more technical problems with how we've chosen to go about effecting this process. But here we are, we're doing it. We're saying, oh no, as a matter of fact, empiricism has limits. Here is where those limits are. And, here's an example of where it breaks down.
Yeah, well, the theory of evolution may be generally accepted, but it's still not the fact of evolution.
Well, what I always found interesting about the theory of evolution is that humans have been unable to replicate it. We can observe in genetics dynamic changes in humanity. We can, of course, observe, radiation mutates genes and by damage. Like there are things that happen, but humanity has never been able to replicate it. Okay.
They're not, and they produce defects, not things that are better.
So you have to assume that all the mutations are in a generally positive direction. That kind of seems to refute the laws of randomness.
Okay. There's
It's
a
not
famous
entirely consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a famous test on this. If I flip a coin one time, or if I flip a coin 10 times and it comes up positive, or it comes up heads 8 times, you say, aha, I have determined that heads will come up 80% of the time. And there's actually a chart done on this. And you can, in the first 100 flips, you get these wild swings. But by the time you get to 1,000, it's almost exactly 50-50. And I forget what the term for this problem is. Okay. So in a random selection, if your assertion is that X is random, then it must be observationally close to 50-50. The closer it is, the better the more accurate your observation is. If instead you look at something and you say, well, gee, the entire system seems to be set up to remove bad mutations and promote good ones, well, then you can't, that's not random. There's something else driving that. Okay. The assertion has to be that there is a 50% chance that a mutation will pass. But we don't see that. So there's something else operating on that system, putting its thumb on a scale, to use another phrase. There's something out there that's putting its thumb on the scale. And here's the thing. We humans don't know what it is. But
wait, there was a human that knew what it was. Adam Smith, 1776. He wrote about the unseen hand.
Okay, not quite what I was getting at, Steve. So there's an interesting problem, a philosophical problem that's come up with this evolutionary debate. The only time that humanity has been able to create a thing is when humanity creates it. Humanity is the one putting its thumb on the scale and saying, well, I could create life out of these conditions if I do this and that. Well, shit, you just proved that something else created it. Humanity has never been able to create an experiment where we create a completely sealed environment with no human intervention. We seed it with, and we seed the environment with what we think initial conditions should work, and then life pops out of that. No, we always have to stick our thumb on the scale and create that.
Okay, let me correlate. Adam Smith, the unseen hand. Okay. In economics, there's the unseen hand of, the will of the people and, greed and desire and, all this. And it just works. Don't know how, it just happens. Like at the Big Bang, first there was just this ball. And then something happened. Boom! there's always this outside thing, outside unseen thing that happened. You might want to call it the uncaused cause. Other people call this God. Could there be a God influence that explains a lot of things? When people, these atheists, say something happened, could it be the presence and actions and will of God?
Creation and providence, sure. God rules over things in his creation and providence. But you're also using logic there. Good thought, Steve. I'm going to circle back to logic now. We've been using logic all here tonight. Okay, lots of logic, lots of deductions, lots of observations, induction. So informal logic, there's 4 types of logic: informal, formal, symbolic, and mathematical. A lot of times symbolic and mathematical kind of collapse in its own area. But informal logic uses deductive and inductive reasoning as content-based. Formal logic is deduction, yet focuses on the structure and rules of reasoning. And then there's symbolic logic and mathematical logic. They use symbols to show forth the logical arguments and arrive at conclusions via deduction. And I'll show you an example. When I took a class on logic in undergrad, this is from the book they had us use. I look at this like, how the hell was I able to do this while I was taking the class and I was involved in it? And could I do this right now? No. Give me a couple months, probably. Yeah. Or maybe a couple weeks, but here's an example of symbolic logic. It looks like math, doesn't it?
It actually, this is a form of math.
Those are fun times. That you could break down these arguments and analyze it and break it down to symbol. Nuts.
We're not going to bore our audience with this. We're not.
But it is important, to realize that these things can be formulated and dissected and so on and so forth. But there's also fallacies in logic. That's probably more applicable to everyday thinking and our audience. And I'll show you that list. I'll share this tab instead. I just used AI. I used AI for this, guy. So I got a fallacies list using Google AI. There's fallacies of relevance, where the premise is irrelevant to the conclusion. There's ad hominem, attacking the person making the argument rather than the argument. Appeal to emotion, manipulating emotions, fear, pity, instead of using valid reasoning. Red herring, introducing an irrelevant issue to distract from the main argument. Straw man, misrepresenting an opponent's argument to make it easier to attack. You see that they attack the red pill, so they create straw mans out of the red pill, and they think they're attacking the red pill, and it's actually they're attacking something else.
Every damn day.
Yep. Fallacies of weak induction, where the premise doesn't adequately support the conclusion. Hasty generalization, drawing a conclusion based on insufficient evidence. Appeal to authority, relying on the opinion of an authority who's not an expert on the relevant issue. False cause, assuming a causal relation, we talked about this a bit, assuming a causal relationship based on correlation alone is called post hoc fallacy. Okay, slippery slope, claiming that an initial action will inevitably lead to a series of negative consequences. Fallacies of presumption, premise assumes what it tries to prove. I think everybody actually does this on some certain level, but it's not necessarily vicious reasoning. Circular reasoning is begging the question, using the conclusion as part of the premise. False dilemma or false dichotomy, presenting only two options when more possibilities exist. Loaded question, phrasing a question to imply an answer that's not explicitly stated.
Okay. I want to stop on begging the question a little bit, because everybody on Twitter throws this one around. Okay. Most
Sure.
of the time they are wrong when they are using it. Okay. Note what it says here, using the conclusion as part of the premise. This is not the same thing. And people will say, oh, well, you guys say that God exists because we can't measure the in-between. That's not the same thing. Okay. But they'll try and make it that because we have to make the same assumption that they do. And it is an assumption. Okay. But it's not the conclusion. We have to make, just because somebody makes an inference on the basis of what you say, that is not begging the question. Okay.
Well, like when you say, I believe in reasoning, well, then you start listing out reasons for reasoning. What are you doing? I mean, at some level, everybody has these presuppositions or assumptions to even operate in this world. It doesn't mean
Right.
it's viciously circular.
Well, right. That's kind of like a weak circular argument. It's like we all have assumptions about the world, because if you don't, you literally go insane and we send you to the funny farm. Okay. So be careful when using this. It's I was talking to a friend of mine. When you're claiming begging the question, you need to have a strict definition of the words conclusion and premise. Okay. I have to be including the conclusion that I am driving at in the premise that I state.
Oh, look, Mr. Dugan just did that.
I mean, dude, you are not wrong. But you know what? There would be more of, not no posts, but Twitter would be mostly full of cat videos and meme posts. I mean, which frankly might be a little nicer to get back to than the slop we've got right now, the logical slop we've got. So, yes.
Yeah. Fallacies of ambiguity, unclear or shifting meaning, equivocation, using a word with multiple meanings and switching between those meanings within the argument.
Women, all women.
Yeah. Be very careful. Ask them how they're using the term.
Yes.
So just ask questions. So when you use this term, and then later in your argument you use the same term, are you meaning the same thing? Right. And then there's amphibole. Ambiguous grammatical structure leads to a fault argument. Okay, so be careful with your writing, basically. Fallacies related to social pressure, bandwagon appeal to popularity, claiming something is good or true because it's popular. Oh, that's like appeal to consensus, basically.
Yeah, it's not quite the same thing. Appeal to consensus is a combination of appeal to popularity and appeal to authority. Because in order for the consensus, there has to be some authority that sort of describes the consensus.
Sisterhood, team woman. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but appeal to popularity right now is probably the most widespread fallacy in the tradcon space, really. Okay. They love this stuff. So, well, okay. If we've talked about this in relation to the church quite a bit, how many times do pastors say, well, but if we don't tell the women what they want to hear, they won't come. And if they don't come, they won't pay their tithes. And if they don't pay their tithes, my doors close. And so then I can't talk to them at all. There's actually a few different fallacies in there, but one of them is an appeal to popularity. I have to be popular. And so they end up claiming that the popular thing is true. And that's how you get egalitarianism.
That's how you get concert bands in church.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
But
That's how you get fog machines.
I've been married twice. If I don't appeal to my wife and agree with her, I won't get any sex. Wait a minute. I did that. I didn't get any sex. Damn.
Are you having issues over there, Steve?
Oh yes, I am.
So,
okay, but read the next one, because what is the next one? It's a corollary.
Appeal to tradition. I want to be very careful here. Don't think you're the smartest person, always the smartest person in the room, all smartest person in existence. Yes, you should evaluate arguments throughout history, and if they've been received as, sound arguments and truthful arguments, you might want to be hesitant. But there's appeal to tradition. It is a fallacy. Arguing something is good or true because it has always been done that way.
Okay, I want to.
It has always been done that way.
I want to make an example here. Everyone knows the story of Copernicus, and everyone knows that humanity for many, many years just accepted the what's the term for it? Not heliocentric, but the Earth-centric model of the universe, where the entire universe spins around Earth and Earth was stationary. Okay, Copernicus comes along, proves that it's not true, and gets promptly vilified for it. Okay, the vilification of Copernicus was on the basis of an appeal to tradition. Okay.
That was a similar thing with Galileo, right?
Oh yeah, Galileo. Sorry. Yes. Whoever it was who cracked the. Sorry, guys. I'm a little under the weather with allergies today. Right, but so there was this appeal to this tradition. Well, we've always said that the universe is Earth-centric, and then somebody comes along and proves that it's not. So your appeal to tradition it's only a fallacy when somebody can bring evidence and an argument and data that says, well, is that really true? Now, that new stuff has to be tested, and it was. The heliocentric model of the Earth has been proven time and time again, and now we just accept it today, when the people who killed him or threw him in jail or something. Okay, they couldn't be, so they were making an appeal to tradition. The logical fallacy comes when you ignore countervailing evidence. Okay, it's not an appeal to tradition to say, you know what, this has always worked, and we can go back throughout history and we can pull out evidence of it always working. And then someone comes along and says, I want to try something new. And we did this with feminism. Okay.
See, let me build upon that. Tradition is usually right because it's endured the test of time. Occasionally, very occasionally, tradition is wrong. But it's not wrong just because it's tradition. And if somebody says, well, you're just appealing to tradition, therefore you're wrong. No, no. It's a misapplication. To overturn tradition, you have to have a lot of evidence and logic and observation. It takes a lot to overturn tradition. You can't just say, well, you're just appealing to tradition, therefore you're wrong. No, it doesn't work that way.
And I just looked it up, and it was Copernicus. So yay, even in my sleep app.
Yeah, I was.
Or my
Well, both were. I don't know. I couldn't remember Copernicus whether how much persecution or whatever he endured. I know Galileo did. So
yeah. Well, see, but that's the interesting thing. Copernicus came about 100 years before Galileo
Right.
did, and Galileo took more shit for it. So it's not like it was even new at the time. I mean, Copernicus was born in 1473. Galileo was born in 1564. But Copernicus was the guy, he came up with a lot of the math that we now use. So anyway.
I'll say this, okay, about those two stories. You don't know the truth. You have heard a narrative that leads you to believe certain things. The actual facts during the time, what they did, what the church did, needs to be interpreted by what was going on at the time and the actual things that happened. The paraphrase becomes a narrative. So just keep that in mind. Most of history that we believe is a narrative.
Yeah, but at the same time, the church did do stuff, and we have records.
Absolutely, it did.
So
it may not be as egregious as you think. They may have had their reasons. They may have been wrong. It may not have been as severe as you've been led to believe. If you want to figure it out, you're going to have to delve into it deeply and draw your own conclusion.
Well, I mean, it's key to point out here that the church pretty quickly after Galileo's death lifted the ban on his works, on printing his works. So, okay, guys, just as an aside here, we want to make this big conspiracy theory out of it. What if it was just some dude in the church who really didn't like what that guy had to say, or maybe just didn't like Galileo as a person?
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I read paraphrases.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know, and that's Steve's point. We never will know. That history is lost to time, and ever shall it be. But my what I'm trying to do here is I'm using the principle of least malice here. More ignorance. The more ignorance there is, assume less malice, right? I'm just trying to point out what are other possible causes. It is very popular to go to the most egregious possible cause because that's the one that hits us in the feels the hardest. But if we find out that it's just some dude who didn't like Galileo, even though Copernicus has done the work over 100 years ago, right? Then it doesn't have that same emotional grip. Oh, it was just two dudes who didn't like each other. Oh, okay. It's nothing, nothing interesting there. Continue on.
All right.
Sorry.
I got two more other fallacies. Again, there's other fallacies. This is not an exhaustive list, but just to wet your whistle in a way. There's an appeal to ignorance, so claiming something is true because it has not been proven false, or vice versa. It hasn't been proven either way, so you assume the truth of it.
Another popular one on Twitter, which frankly drives some of us nerds to go do the research, and that's always fun to watch them implode.
Right. And there's the tu quoque. So that's appeal to hypocrisy, discrediting an argument because the person making it is inconsistent with their own advice. So basically saying the argument may be true even though they are internally inconsistent with what they're saying.
So, Nick, you've studied these more than me. I have a very serious question for you. I've been married twice. First marriage, that is not good. And all these things were used against me in arguments. Second marriage, somewhat, especially in the divorce. Where do women go to learn all these skills to use these fallacies so effectively against men?
Feels? And
I don't
popular
know.
opinion?
You know what? It just seems to me that women are very skilled at utilization of fallacies in discussions or arguments.
Steve, I will try to match your serious question with a serious answer. And
Okay.
my serious answer is fallacies are what occur in the absence of logic. Okay. If you do not have logic, the only thing you can create are fallacies. Which is to say that women, and I have seen them do this, so don't at me, bro. Women can utilize logic. I've seen them do it. But it is not it's not their natural mode. Okay. They don't like it, they don't enjoy it, but I have seen it done. So probabilistically, women are far more likely to use reaction. And when you are reacting, you are not using logic. You are saying, I don't like this thing, right? Okay. So this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Why does it take me so long to respond to something? Because I'm not reacting. But I'm also going through my work and checking the logic of the work that I'm doing. And so when somebody accuses me of using a logical fallacy, I actually go back and check my work again. And then I check their work. Okay. I am guilty of logical fallacies occasionally.
Sure.
Occasionally I find them and I go, you know what? You're right. Let me rephrase that argument. Okay. And then the conversation continues. But in most cases, particularly the cases where I've actually put some effort into the writing, mostly I find that they are using the fallacy they are accusing me of using, which is what women do.
Projection.
A confession
I'm
through projection.
amazed here. Sounds to me like you have admitted that you were wrong and you didn't die.
Wow. I'm not dead, and I admitted I was wrong. Oh, guys, here's another one. I admitted I was wrong to a woman, and I'm not dead yet. Now, Elena, this the woman I admitted I was wrong to, still to this day remembers the story. And what the story is, it doesn't matter what, but to this happened back in, I want to say 2017. And to this day, I hear about that time I was wrong. Okay. But I did admit that I was wrong because I was flat out wrong. And you know what, guys, I'm still married. I'm still alive. I'm still here. I still have my frame. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Men in general don't think they're going to die if they admit they're wrong. Women, on the other hand, would rather die than admit they were wrong.
tactic.
Humility. There's this thing called humility, guys. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
All right. So yes, it's not wrong to admit you're wrong. Problem is most guys cave in to admit they're wrong, even though they're right, because they don't want to deal with the crap anymore. It's a cost effect. They're doing a cost and effect
benefit analysis.
Yep. And sometimes those are actually flawed. Anyways, that's for another day, another discussion. But understanding these types of logic and fallacies should help you. But also, I actually do this. I discovered a tool when I was in seminary. This is called discourse analysis, where you actually, it's not exclusively, we used it exclusively for analyzing Bible passages, like the logical flow of the argument, how it's, the different aspects of the argument, and how the conversation flows, how they support their argument, and how they make applications, cause and effect, conditional statements, et cetera, means end, way end, situation response. Anyways, I actually use this. I took this tool. I still use it when I evaluate Bible passages, but I use it in I still use it in all the books that I read. So a lot of the books I read, I get into these really important logical argumentations, and I use the symbols and the discourse analysis to interpret and understand how the author is presenting his argument, the evidence, and arriving at his conclusions. And I'll show you that real quick. It takes a while to get used to, but it's actually easier than sitting there breaking down each argument. So this way you can get a more full picture, then understand where his premises and all that crap is. So I'll share the book. It's an interpretive lexicon of New Testament Greek, analysis of prepositions, adverbs, particles, relative pronouns, and conjunctions by G.K. Beale. And I'll show you an example, kind of a chart of how they do it. So you have adversatives, so logical relationships in alphabetical order. So adversative, alternative, cause effect, comparison, condition, general specific, fact interpretation, grounds, locative, inference, means end, negative positive, no logical relationship, progression, question answer, series, situation response, temporal, and way end. And to see that in action, I actually have a page here if I can find it. Oh, it's got my my tabs. There you go. Can you guys see it?
Nope. You've still got the abbreviations.
I got to add this one to stage. Sorry. Remove that one, add this one to stage. There you go. So this is an assignment I did in 2013. So you see the temporal and when, Kai, Hote, he was alone, what, those around him, the 12, were asking him concerning the parables. And he said to them, to you has been given the mystery of the kingdom of God, but to those outside, everything is in perils. That's an alternative, or it could be a plus and a minus there. You could do either one. In order that this they see and not know, and those able to hear may hear, and again a negative kai may understand, lest may pote, they may turn again and they be forgiven. So you have a means end right here. In order that what they may see, lest they may turn again, they be forgiven. That's a means end. There's another means end. To you has been given the mystery of kingdom of God, and all this stuff to the end that lest they may not turn again, lest they be forgiven. There's a general specific here, and he said to them, what? All this information here, the emphasis again right here. See how the argument always hinges on end of verse 12 here. Situation responses all takes upon a situation, which is this temporal thing right here. And the response is all of this except the emphasis is right here. Therefore, you can find the exegetical main point and homiletical main point. So you can use this to analyze any text that you're reading and see the flow of his argument and how he supports it. It's just helpful.
Nick, really? Why do you have to go to seminary, spend all this time learning this stuff, and apply it to interpret the Bible, which is just written for the average man, and the average man should be able to interpret the written word of God and understand what it says?
They're not trained. They're not trained. A lot of them don't think logically. They're not trained in hermeneutics and how to interpret the context of the passage, the content of the genre. They're not able to understand the flow. A lot of them are not able to understand the flow of the argument and the grammar involved. And a lot of times, it's important to know that. And sometimes you're corrected when you read somebody that wrote something like 1,000 years before. It's like, no. His logic and his understanding of the passage is actually better than what I arrived at. So then you have to revise what you thought you knew to fit into what is actually the truth sometimes.
But in practice, Luther had this great insight. So he separated from the Catholics. And then Calvin had a somewhat different idea, not necessarily at odds. So he formed his group. And, then you got other people who had different disagreements and different ideas. And now we've come to the point where, you know what? I have my own interpretation. So I'm going to open the corner of Main Street and 2nd Avenue Church because I have the truth. Does this make any sense? Now, okay, so, there are valid reasons to separate because, the branch may go off straight. And I'll throw a bone here to Nick. The Presbyterian Church of America starts to, we're going to embrace a little bit of this female preachers and stuff like that, whatever the reason was. So there's a group that splits off and says, no, we're going to adhere to the core. We'll call them the Orthodox Presbyterian Church. But then there's dissension in those ranks. And they throw out some people there too. So it's all about, in practice, it's individual interpretations. And no, I'm not going to hold the Catholic Church above this because, we got a lot of dissension. You got the progressive and you got the trad, Latin Mass people, and you got the in-betweens. It's the body of Christ is pretty fractured.
It's fractured.
But you know what? There's got to be something is not right here.
No, it's
not everybody is equipped to interpret. We have to go to the elders. That's an appeal to tradition. Yeah, tradition is usually right. Sometimes they're wrong. But I might not be the person that has the intellect to prove them wrong. And my feelings that they're wrong may not be sufficient for me to separate.
That's true. This topic is actually rather complex. It would take a whole nother stream. But look, the normies don't understand. Don't condemn the normies. Because I'll say this of the Eastern, the Catholic, and the Protestants. They all anathematize one another, and I think unnecessarily. Yes, the truth matters. The arguments matter. A little humility can go a long way. Yet there are really bad, there's some bad apples in there that really do want to twist the scriptures to their own destruction that are in power and that they will claim, why are you separating? Well, you've thrown a lot of bullcrap out. You've denied the Trinity. You've denied the Bible. Those are not, I'll say this, those are not Christians. And you have a problem if you have to submit yourselves to people saying things that are outright heresy. So there's levels of this discourse of separating and not separating, and people have to make that decision, yet most people are not really equipped to make that decision and think for themselves. Logic can help you. Tradition can help you. Humility can help you.
Hey, Nick.
That's better. Yes.
You're getting somewhere that I was, one of the directions I was trying to go in the morality stream that we did. It is, one of the things that you hear all the time is, oh, but people want to be told how to think about things. And they always speak about it as if that's a bad thing, as if, well, right. Yes, people do want to be told how to think about things, because either they don't have the time to do the kind of detailed breakdown that we're doing right now. Look, even we have lives outside of the YouTubeverse, or they're just not capable of doing this. We've talked about IQ before. There's a large number of people out there who really are just never going to be able to do these philosophical breakdowns. So when somebody whines about, oh, well, people want us to tell them how to think about things, I go, hell yes, and we should. Okay. And yeah, that's a moral choice. And yeah, that means that you have to then give the group a collection of shared morals to operate under, so that morals just being heuristics here, okay, so that they can, in their own limited time and mental capacity, arrive at a conclusion that is not just beneficial to them, but beneficial for the people around them. These shared moralities are not just good, they are absolutely necessary to the functioning of society. Jefferson knew it. Ben Franklin knew it when they wrote the Constitution. Yeah.
John Adams.
Yeah, John Adams knew it. Yeah, John Adams, the guy who said this government is for a moral people and for no other. Like, that's what he's talking about when he says that. Like, so it is not a bad thing to tell people how to think about things. And in fact, the greatest explosion of human creativity and thought happened when the church was enforcing its morality on large groups of people.
Yes.
We can argue about the excesses of the church, but the excesses of the church do not take away from the benefit of understanding that most people are not going to be able to do this on their own. They need you to give them a guidebook on how to think. And not only is that a good thing, it's a necessary thing for the survival of society. Go ahead, Steve.
Let me point something out. I don't have any facts to back this up. Maybe a bit of observation. Do you think that up until 1517, or up, okay, we'll use 1517, when Luther put his 99 theses, or however you want to say it, on the door of the Württemberg Cathedral, do you think there wasn't any dissension within the church, Catholic Church? Oh, hell yes, there was. We talked about Galileo, Copernicus. Oh, there was a great schism in 1054 where the Orthodox split off. Oh, yeah, I think those were the only disagreements. There are humanity. There were disagreements all the time. Most of them we don't know about. Didn't rise to the point of a big kerfuffle. Oh, some of them were actually pretty serious, because what was it in the early church? Athanasius
I'm
prevailed
talking about the
against the
Trinitarian
Nestorians.
controversy. No,
Yes,
Arians.
The Arians.
Yeah.
Man, that was a big thing. The Arians denied the Trinity, and the minority won. Okay, so there's been divisions all through. There's been kerfuffles. Yeah, we think that the Catholic Church was so oppressive because what they did in these few instances. Okay, they probably were wrong. They corrected themselves. Okay, it's not a perfect institution. Okay, so let's bring that forward to now. How do the three of us operate? I'm Catholic, Nick, and Plutarch are Presbyterian. Do we focus on our differences?
No.
And argue about theological
Sometimes.
things? Or do we say,
Sometimes.
oh, here's all the crap that we agree about, and we focus on that? And yeah, we'll get into little squabbles here and there.
We
What?
particularly in our behind the scenes
not a big
chat when
deal.
we organize stuff. We'll occasionally throw barbs at each other, but it's mostly done in good fun, right?
Right.
Nick and I know what Steve is, and occasionally we have to rail against that damn papist in our chat. But does that mean that does Steve feel like he's being attacked? No, he gets it and he laughs right along with us, and we move along, and yes, do we occasionally talk theology? Of course we do. It's three Christians getting together. What did you expect? So that's it's like the difference is you don't focus on the points of disagreement. Now, I get it. The points of disagreement make for fantastic YouTube television. Okay. They get people's blood boiling and it looks like there's a lot of these really great conversations going on. But I got to be honest. They tend to be conversations over shit that really just does not matter in the slightest. Okay. And that's why we were saying earlier, you've got the Overton window and it's back and forth. Oh yeah, the actual truth is probably somewhere north of the window, right? It's, somewhere else entirely. But
the world may be coming to an end, but damn it, Fords are better than Chevys.
Well, right. And so for us, it's far more important, at least in our conversations, to focus on iron sharpening iron, as opposed to squabbling over this detail or that detail. And goes back to what I said. I don't interact much on Twitter. Why? Because it's mostly people squabbling over things that don't matter. And if I try to interject and say, no, guys, you both are missing the point. This thing actually over here is the thing that matters. I get told I'm a spurg, idiot, stupid, don't know what I'm talking about. I should just leave them alone. Because to these people, the thing I've learned is that these people view these trivialities as core to their identity. It's the trivialization of your morality. The least important things are the hills that you're willing to die on. Okay. I don't care if you have some doctrinal disagreement with me, but if you come to me saying things like saying that if you come to me and you say this thing is true when this thing is just a probability, and I call you out for stating a probability is truth, and you call me a spurg, you're not having a debate. You're attempting to shut down a debate on something where the words actually matter, because you end up taking your truth to such an extreme that people look at you and they go, well, dude, you're fucking out to lunch. I don't need to listen to you. And it is the enemy, whoever you classify that to be in your debate, wants you to chase the trivial. They want you to use tactics like this instead of going. The actual correct response when somebody does that, by the way, is like, okay, you just made an assertion that probability is truth. The actual correct response is to go, yep, you're right. Okay. And then why? Because now we can move on and have a conversation. But if you just throw back, oh, well, you're just a spurg. What you've told me is you're not interested in learning anything. You're not interested in having a good, well, as Chief says, a good faith interaction. You just want me to shut up and go away because what I'm saying is inconvenient to you. And people will figure that out and they'll recognize what you're doing, and the normies will figure that out. So that behavior is the behavior of a psychopath. Okay. We have that picture we've shown before, the psychopaths, they manipulate the normies manipulate the spurgs, and the spurgs manipulate the psychopaths, right? Okay. So the psychopath is the one who wants to argue over the trivialities. And the spurg is the antidote to that. So when I am, quote unquote, spurging by pointing out the insufficiencies of your argument, I am actually trying to pull you back, because the normies will notice what you're doing eventually. Not right away. The spurgs notice it first because it's a violation of their sense of correctness. But eventually the normies look at that and they go, well, but they're just, that person's just out to lunch. Go ahead, Nick.
No, you're fine. I'm going to kind of end this section on logic here. We've by addressing the foundation of logic, then I'll hit it right at the end of this stream again. But this is from old book. I have a few books that talk about this. Is The Doctrine of the Knowledge of God by John Frame. He's got a section called The Certainty of Logic. It says, compared with the principles of other sciences like physics and history, the laws of logic seem to have a peculiar certainty about them, and in this respect, they're similar to the laws of mathematics. He continues saying, what makes logic so certain? A number of theories have been proposed, the following among them. And one is innate idea. Some have said that logic is certain because of its origin. We do not learn it through sense experience, through the innate ideas of some sort. However, it is very difficult to prove that any particular idea is an innate idea. But unless there's some independent evidence of such an innate ideas, the proposed solution is not very credible. Furthermore, it's not very clear why the innateness of an idea makes it certain. Might we not have some innate ideas that are false? Okay. So he says, indeed, it would be argued that at least some of the data of sense experience is just as certain as laws of logic. I am now looking at my hand, and I think that I am just as certain of the existence of my hand as I am of any law of logic. And then the second one is, so first, laws of logic are innate. Second is convention. Others have argued that logic is certain because it's true by convention. Right. And he also says, similarly, some have said that logic and mathematics consist of definitions, the implication of those definitions. Some would go beyond this view and say that for this reason, logic and mathematics don't tell us anything about the world, only about the definitions of our language. Another way of putting it is to say that the laws of logic and mathematics are analytic rather than synthetic. We've talked about that a little bit earlier today. The predicate is included in the definition of the subject. Anyways, and some also say that it's merely contrived consensus of society or individuals come up with these things as well. But why does this matter? Well, I'll start with this interesting exchange in Idiocracy. This is Joe's trial. The judge says, no, now, prosecutor, why do you think he done it? So imagine yourself going before a court and your life's being decided about you. Right? There's moral implications of logic. Okay. Prosecutor says, okay, number one, Your Honor, just look at it. And B, we've got all this like evidence of how like this guy didn't even pay at the hospital. And I heard that he doesn't even have his tattoo. And the crowd boos. And the prosecutor says, I know. And I'm all, you got to be shitting me. But check this out, man. Judge should be like, guilty, peace. Okay, guys.
But
There's
just
a
look
little-
at him.
Just look at him.
Number one,
there's
Your
a-
Honor. Just look at him. He's a spur.
Oh.
He's an idiot, right? He's the word they use was retard.
Yeah, we got this like evidence. And listen to this non sequitur. And I heard this bad thing about him. So, I mean, how can you not convict him?
Hey, that's how it works in family courts against the man, doesn't it?
Gee, you picked that up too, Nick?
Yeah.
Well, remember what I said earlier about idiocracy. I think they were way too optimistic in how fast we would get there. They said 500 years.
Okay.
5 might have been a more accurate
No.
assessment.
The argument in family courts, he's a bad man because I feel unsafe.
We got all this like evidence, of course, not there, right? And look at him. Oh, he's a man. Look at how he is.
Exactly. Just look at him. He's a man.
They don't even need no evidence. I just feel unsafe. You can't even. Evidence doesn't fucking matter. How the hell can you prove that I don't feel unsafe, which is justification just on my say so?
Guys, we are entering in the why does logic matter? We are entering into this world. And this is its end. He's staring out the window like, what the actual hell did I wake up to?
Damn.
And these are our magistrates.
You know what? Go back to that previous one. This relates to my prior stream. Why morality matters.
Lipstick on a pig, yeah.
What was it that? Yeah, lipstick on a pig. Because this is tofu dreg construction.
I especially like the tower that's held up by ropes attached to the other tower. But that's all these people know how to do. They're not engineers. They don't know how to go in and fix a building or bring a building down and replace it with a new one. So what do? They go do what you would expect somebody with an IQ of 60 to do. Throw ropes around the two buildings together and try to hold them up that way.
We have, there's logic is out the window, moral, and there's morality is reflected in lack of knowledge and a society that doesn't care because what do they do care about? Is this the crowd booing, saving face, I'm looking good. The crowd agrees with me. Boom. Entertainment. When the medium is the message, okay, your medium of knowledge is the message. There's a book. It's called Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman. And he talks about Are we living in 1984 or a Huxley and Brave New World? I think it's actually a combination of both, but more Brave New World. He's talking about how television shapes people. It's not a very good ultimate method of absorbing information. You can do it that way, but no. With the invention of technology, there are good things that can happen, but also many bad things that can happen. And we never consciously, society does not, the normies do not reflect on how we are receiving our information impacts how we live and what we value and our knowledge base.
Nick, how do you know we're not living in Animal Farm? Was that Huxley who wrote that one too?
No, I don't think that was Huxley. I don't think so.
Same guy who wrote Brave New World.
Was that Huxley? I don't think it was Orwell.
No. Orwell.
Orwell
Okay.
did, and he did 1984
Orwell.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I knew it was same author. I was one of those. You know, those books were not just entertainment. They represented a vision of the future, which was easier to tell in parable than any other way.
And people still don't get it.
I'm going to read a few things from this book. The Epistemology of New Forms Such as Television. So this was written, I think, back in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. When was it written? Yeah, it might be important. I think, 1985 was the original, it looks like. Okay. So he says, the epistemology of new forms such as television does not have an entirely unchallenged influence. Find it useful to think of the situation in this way. Changes in the symbolic environment are like changes in the natural environment. They are both gradual and additive at first, and then all at once a critical mass is achieved, as the physicists say. And says, we have reached, I believe, a critical mass, and that electronic media have decisively and irreversibly changed the character of our symbolic environment. We are now a culture whose information, ideas, and epistemology are given form by television, not by the printed word. Print is now merely a residual epistemology and will remain so, aided to some extent by the computer. Again, he wrote this in the 1980s, and newspapers and magazines that are made to look like television screens. He says, I am arguing that a television-based epistemology pollutes public communication and its surrounding landscape, not that it pollutes everything. He says, every new technology for thinking involves a trade-off. It giveth and taketh away, although not quite in equal measure. And then his concluding statement of his book says, what I suggest here is a solution, is what Aldous Huxley suggested as well, and I can do no better than he. He believed with H.G. Wells that we are in a race between education and disaster. And he wrote continuously about the necessity of our understanding the politics and epistemology of the media. For in the end, he was trying to tell us that what afflicted the people in Brave New World was not that they were laughing instead of thinking, but they did not know that they were laughing about. They did not know what they were laughing about and why they had stopped thinking. So, guys, reflect, use logic. TV and streams are not the be all end all. Read a book, think logically. And if you are absorbing information on the TV or streams or other media, electronic media, notice that they're always giving you a perspective. You're receiving a perspective. The control of the camera. The medium is meant to entertain primarily, not educate. So when you're interacting with that, understand the perspective and understand the logical flow of their argument. It can help you.
How
All
can
right.
I do that if I don't know how to think logically? If I don't have any time to think logically because I'm so busy being entertained by the internet, television, and YouTube?
Can't help you.
Okay.
I can't make people do anything. I lack the power of the sword. All I can do is try to convince people. And there's no guarantee it will work.
Well, and
You
that's
can try.
this is why we say attack the ideas, not the man.
Right.
Attacking the man is cheap and it's not very effective. But if you attack the ideas, maybe, just maybe, we can change a few minds. And anybody
Right.
telling you that you're going to change the minds of everyone or that you need to is probably selling you something. Very likely they're selling you, come look at me. I have all the answers. You don't need to change everyone's mind. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, because most people just want to be told what to think about things. You don't need to change their minds. You just need to tell them what to think about things. Okay. It's the people telling them what to think whose minds you need to change. And that is done using the tools of epistemology, logic, debate, psychology, etc. And that's going to be done by a small number of people. And God help us, those people had better be qualified to do what they're doing. Because if they're not, they will make the wrong assertions about and they will promulgate morality that is destructive. And there is such a thing as a destructive morality. And our crowd knows that. I'm just stating that for
does
the
not
record.
equal 5. Yeah, 2 + 2 does not equal 5.
Right.
And when the television of entertainment tells you to get in your feels and it's emotions, oh, you just need to be accepting of lies. You start thinking 2 + 2 = 5. X and X and XY are not just male and female. You get this crap.
Oh, you had to dig that up. Oh.
So
you get this crap. It's not logical.
We started.
It's not It's not logical. It's not scientific. It's just my feelings. I believe this. It flies in the face of all fact and logic.
Back to this whole television idea. Okay, we started out doing this podcast twice a week. It was a lot of work. We had a lot of bottled up ideas that we could just bring forth, and it really wasn't that difficult. We got about 9 months in, and now we need to scale it back. So we do this once a week. Now, do the three of us individually or collectively have the ability to put together a show every day? Yes, if that was our purpose. And
we
didn't
could
have other jobs.
It would be
okay,
low
but
quality
then
slop.
The quality would go down, but our goal would then be entertainment. And we'd be after money because we'd have to make money from it. Because we would make money from entertaining you. We don't make any money. We're not entertaining anybody. And you know this if you're watching our show. We're here to educate you. And this is not an entertainment show. We do try to have some fun during this, but it's not entertainment. Maybe that's the reason why our subscribership is so very low. We're not entertaining guys.
Well, guys, logic matters. truth matters, and there's a morality involved as well as a reality involved. You can't talk about one without talking about the other. And what is the basis of logic? There's another thing I want you to think about. We have not found an adequate basis of logic based upon autonomous reasoning. And they fly into all these problems of irrationalism, empiricism, and rationalism, which self-refute or do not comport with reality. But I showed this clip last time, and I'm going to start bringing this to a close, guys. Here's something to ponder and think about.
Answered in the very same way?
No, they are not. They're answered by the use of certain methods, though, that are the same. Reason, logic, and presenting evidence.
Right. I heard you mention logical binds and logical self-contradictions in your speech. Mm-hmm. You did say that?
I said it. I used that phrase, yes.
Do you believe there are laws of logic, then?
Absolutely.
Are they universal?
They're agreed upon by human beings. They aren't laws that exist out in nature.
Are they simply conventions, then?
They're conventions, but they're conventions that are self-verifying.
Are they sociological laws or laws of thought?
They are laws of thought which are interpreted by men and promulgated by men.
Are they material in nature?
How can a law be material?
That's the question I'm going to ask you.
I would say no.
At this time, now you have an opportunity to cross-examine Dr. Bronson.
Dr. Bonson, would you call God material or immaterial?
Immaterial.
What is something that's immaterial?
Something not extended in space.
Can you give me an example of anything other than God that's immaterial?
Laws of logic.
Logic cannot be based just upon mere materialism of atoms colliding, fizzing, and certainly given time, speed, and temperature. Laws of logic are not merely agreed upon conventions. They are universal, abstract, timeless, applying everywhere, all the time. They're abstract. They're not material. So therefore, this is the God, the triune God of Holy Scriptures that mankind continually rebels against and suppresses the truth in their unrighteousness. You might not agree with me, but I don't think you can come up with a better answer.
So, if the laws of logic are not material, does that mean they're also timeless?
Yeah, who else is timeless?
Look, the universe has to have order and structure in order to function. And logic is a method of ordering your thoughts. It is no different than the electromagnetic forces. It is the glue that holds consciousness together. If you don't have logic, you are functionally insane. You don't have a conscious.
I'll tell you from how theology answers this. God is truth. God is omniscient. He knows all things, and all things come to pass according to his most perfect, good, and holy will. God made himself known through general and special revelation. Examples like nature and general revelation, like creation and providence, and special revelation, Holy Scripture. God made us in his own image, so we think God's thoughts after him. Mankind was created as rational creatures, not merely rational, however, but able to understand truth and make inferences, induction, and deduction, always on a limited level due to what? Being finite creatures. We were never meant to be God to comprehend it all and have everything coincide in our finite, in our finitude. In the original state, there is no spread of sin that would corrupt our faculties by impairment. But due to the fall into sin, there is impairment via disease, mental illness, and etc. But there are also like the noetic effects of sins, which sin corrupts mankind, even his thinking and reasoning, so that he commits logical errors, misrepresents reality due to his suppression of God, and will not come to acknowledge his dependence upon God, even the laws of logic. Knowing the things of God, they might know things of God apart from the non-saving enlightening eyes, nor will they have saving faith via the truth, especially of the Logos taking upon himself human flesh, the Lord Jesus Christ, who's the perfect man, sinless, who suffered and died for our sins. And you can only have that true knowledge ultimately by the working of the Holy Spirit. And yeah, these laws, God is always true. He's the foundation of truth. And he's created in his image to understand truth. He's timeless. These laws of logic are timeless. These laws of logic are immaterial.
Uh-oh. Did we lose Nick? We might have lost Nick.
No, there is a spiritual reality. There is a spiritual reality, guys. Where did you lose me at?
About 10 seconds ago.
Oh, yeah.
But you won't know this apart from the working of the Holy Spirit. And what happens is, yes, God is true, and he created us in truth, and he's a God of truth. So we think God's thoughts after him and try to discover and understand truth. And these truths are timeless as God is eternal. And laws of logic are also immaterial. There's other attributes of God. You can actually have a book that can actually has a whole section on the attributes of God involved in logic. You can find it here in this book by Vern Poitras on logic. The point is, there's this whole immaterial reality that the autonomous man wants to reject and doesn't want to hold himself to. Because why? He's confronted with his rebellion. He's confronted with the reality of being finite, of being accountable. And that, morality does matter. So some things to think about. I think we've discussed epistemology and logic pretty thoroughly.
Let's just pretend that's not true. You can ignore reality all you want. You can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality.
Nope.
Yep. There's no way around. There's no way around reality. The only thing you do is go through it. So don't invite the consequences by intentional, willful ignorance of reality.
Guys, any closing thoughts? Or getting close to the mark here?
Oh goodness, we've been at this a while.
Yeah.
No, I don't have any closing thoughts. I said what I needed to say. Steve?
No, I've put my 2 cents in there.
All right, guys, we want to avoid this.
We actually really do. I said in the comments that the collapse is all around us, but there is a day after the collapse. There's a day when things stop falling apart, and if you're too busy enjoying the collapse, eventually you're going to be left behind. And that's why we are here having these conversations, is because there will be a world after the world we're in right now, both temporal and not. But
most of us will have to deal with that, but
not
some of us will be raptured. We won't have to deal with it.
Yeah, you're not that lucky. No one listening
Oh.
to Steve is that lucky. No one alive.
Okay, well, damn. Guess I see ya. I see a post collapse then.
Well, right. You know, the collapse is upon us, and there is no stopping it. But there is a question of what the world looks like afterwards, and we can either have more of what we were doing before, which is, you know, verbal bitch fights, or we can sit down and behave like men of the highest order. We can use logic and reason and yes, empiricism too. And we can use shared morals, oh no, to order society, to dig ourselves out of the collapse, because that's the only way to do it. So if you're too busy partying during the collapse, well, you're not going to get a seat at the table for the discussion around shared morals. And your morality is going to be left behind. Which, if you're partying during the collapse, well, maybe that's not such a bad thing. But
we're not defining what the collapse is.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't know how it's going to play out. It's just going to be dramatic, heart-wrenching, scary changes. Probably societal changes, loss of jobs, just upsetting the whole social order. However that turns out. Some might come through fine. For others, it's not going to be so good. I don't know. We are embarking or getting close to a time of great change. What does that mean? I don't know. Figure it out.
Well, Tacticus, I like your comment here. Stay strong and prepare to be a blessing for the future that needs us more than they realize. That is the highest calling of men. Be prepared so that you can be a blessing on the future. And yeah, they don't realize it, but they will. Because you cannot escape the consequences of ignoring reality. I just want to pull it up there. So it's a very good way to think about it. We know at least one man who's going to survive.
Guys. Well, there's no other closing remarks. I want to thank everyone for listening. Hopefully you can share this message. Please like, share, and subscribe. And please leave us comments in the chat. And please join us on Saturdays at 9:15 a.m. Pacific. That's on Plutarch's Wife's channel, Elena Barr's Fitness. Thank you guys for listening, and you'll have a wonderful week. Take care.
There was a firefight! Son of a bitch!